Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Iron Age Marketing. I am Nicky P, here as always. My guest today is Mr. Randall Harris. How you doing today, Randall?
Feeling great, actually. It's a beautiful Friday morning.
It's probably a little bit warmer than I like it to be, but that's the general state of things here in Ohio right now. It's always a little warmer than I want it to be.
It's starting to feel like fall up here in New Hampshire. So
And you guys have beautiful falls up there. There's somewhere floating around up there. There's a cell phone that, we paid $1,500 for that flew off the roof of a car when we were traveling. Someday I'll forgive my wife for that, but
hey, you probably blessed somebody, to be honest. Just like, oh, look, a phone.
I think it's somewhere off the side of one of the White Mountains, so I don't know if it made it.
Probably just pissed off a moose.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of you're not going to be the first person creating a game on the show, but I think you're the first doing like an actual tabletop RPG kind of game. So start getting the background on how you kind of got into this whole world.
Yeah, right on. It started a long time ago. It started like in high school, with just a couple of buddies of mine, naturally. And we all started playing like D&D second edition, aging myself a little bit. But and they were all like one-off campaigns that didn't really lead anywhere. The longest campaign I've had at that time was probably like 3 weeks. But then I was introduced to my first love, Vampire the Masquerade. And just the feel of it, the flow. It was the 90s, so vampires were just all the rage. It was the trench coat era. So if you can be like a blade, in real time, then like sign me up twice. And that was pretty much it. I started playing Vampire the Masquerade throughout my high school career, and I carried it into college. And I got confident enough to actually start running campaigns. And the longest campaign I've actually had was about close to 6 months, kind of borderline 7 months, which is
Pretty hefty campaign.
yeah.
Keeping people around to play that long is pretty impressive.
For sure. Especially like college kids running around doing God knows what. But no, it was really cool. And there's always been like an apprehensiveness to extend the invitation to have people to play, because I know how tabletop RPGs work. You kind of need a Sherpa in order to actually, to get into it, but I extend the invitation to my girlfriend at the time, and she was just like, to my surprise, she was just like, yeah, you know what? Why not? Let's do this. You guys seem to be having a good time. There's drinks. Yeah, let's sign me up. Put fangs in me. And I was like, all right, cool. And she was a part of the really long campaign, the long stretch. And she had a blast. And after every session, I asked them, anything I can improve, the standard questions and whatnot. And every time I would ask that question, there would be something. She would say something, but then she would just, no, everything was great. Until the tail end and the story end. And I was just like, hey, how's everybody like the campaign? Everybody was high-fiving, cracking beers and everything like that. Woo, we killed the big bad. Let's do this. And I was just like, all right, so like feedback. And she was like, you know what? It was very, very hard to get into the game. Like, it was very difficult to actually understand the rules, the mechanics. Character creation was a nightmare. Like she was just like she like honestly there was several times where I almost just was like, you know what, I much rather do something else. And I was like, well, how long did you feel that way? And she was like, honestly, it was probably till I didn't really get into it until like the third week. And that's when things start making sense and everything like that. And I was like, oh, you could have asked questions. She was like, I did. She was like, I was asking questions. She's like, I ended up like when you were asleep, taking the book and reading the book just so I can get more of a firm grasp on it just to play. And it really dawned on me that like most of the tabletop RPGs are like that. Most of the AAA tabletop RPGs are like that.
Especially if you started at AD&D second edition. I mean,
Right, right,
well, that's where I started, and I mean, that's a you know, we started with the heavy of like mechanics that are maybe make less sense to anyone who just doesn't like mechanics.
exactly, exactly. And on top of that, just explaining the general like vibe of role playing and tabletop and dice rolling and everything like that. It's really it's a lot for a person to get into, you know.
Out of curiosity, so I know with like I played the New World of Darkness games, which wasn't Vampire the Masquerade; it was just Vampire at that point. Out of curiosity, so were they playing with like the sanity system and all that stuff in the previous versions? Yeah, then that right there is just enough to complicate things beyond belief for anyone who's not used to those games.
So I you know I tweaked it a bit so that it's a little bit more user friendly. There were we didn't really count like instead of like doing like like you know Diablerie and like understanding the relationships between the clans and everything like that. It was very story focused and story heavy. So like there was guardrails up, you know. Um, but you know that being said, it was it was really it was really eye opening when she was like, you know, it took me a minute to get into it just to play the game. Um, and you're right. You know, we both started with you know AD&D, and so like
Thaco.
the exact. Oh my god.
Explain that to anyone who's not initiated. And
You explain it to me. That's like I just had PTSD. Like right. Like um. But yeah, you know, and between AD&D and D and Vampire to transition to third edition to Vampire the Masquerade, you see that you're like, oh, these rules actually aren't really that draconian. It just takes some getting used to. Um, but like from an outside looking in, there's like if I didn't have a teacher to show me Vampire the Masquerade, there's no way I would be able to take it off the shelf and be like, you know what, let's do this. Let's deep dive into this. I I had to have a person hold my hand.
I have a little game called Arkham Horror on the shelf over here. You can talk to that one.
Oh man. like
I remember I have a buddy of mine who brought that back from the game store. The guy's like, it's funny. Like, don't expect to win the first 100 times you play it.
that's sign me up.
Just,
Like no,
just the rules system itself is so. I don't even know. I to this day don't know if I've ever actually played with all of the rules and played them right because some of them are so weird.
that's so crazy. That's so it took me honestly it took me probably 6 to 7 plays to actually like get through a game of House of Haunted Hill. Yeah, and just because it's just so there's so many like, and don't get me wrong, I love it. Like in that game, the complexity is all about the actual the general gameplay. Um, and so and sometimes the mechanics and the intricacies of the mechanics like mesh well with the general gameplay. It provides the spice for that. But like when there's certain games that are geared towards the veterans like us, you know. Um, and there's very few like starter games and starter campaigns, and the ones that are out there, they're they're one shot campaigns, or they're GURPS, you know, and
Or card games, things like that. Like,
exactly, you know, it's just like, oh, you know, I want to get into board games, and you just slide Munchkin towards them, and they're just like, what is this? Yeah,
it's a good place to start, is what that is.
it is that these are called training wheels. But like I I was like, you know, there has to be a game that is very heavily fantasy driven, very story driven, has a robust um, like history and lore, but also really easy to play and really easy to get into, and not just easy to play, but like easy to DM, to facilitate, to set up, to character create, and everything like that. And I scoured the earth, and I couldn't find a thing. So I was like, you know what? Let's make it. And so I started my company.
Brings us to
Oh, oh, the transition. Hey.